Hello, everybody. Here you have an example of a lesson plan. This one is only for grammar and vocabulary. So, when you're going to teach, the first thing you have to take into account is the level of language proficiency. In this case, this lesson plan is meant to be for B1 students. The ages are like from 16 to 18, but it can also work with adults if you have them. The time for this lesson plan is around 90 minutes, which is like 1 hour and a half, but it could be, I think, even 2 hours. So the general objective or aim from this lesson is to students use the second conditional structure to talk about hypothetical plans or situations. Now, this is the main one. We have also other objectives. The first one is students recognize the sentences used in the second conditional. And number two, students identify useful vocabulary when traveling. So, when you design your own lesson plan, take into account that verbs are really important. Try to use recognize, identify, acknowledged, is aware or the students are capable of, so you will reach or achieve realistic goals with your students. So now moving on, we're going to start with the warm up. As you know, this is just a way to get into the topic. So for this one, I decided to go with some game that is called Chinese Whispers. It's also called a telephone, but this is like the pretty much how it is known. So what you're gonna do as a teacher is that you're gonna write three different sentences in some pieces of paper, all right? And you're going to use the third conditional, the first and the second conditionals, and you're going to write just one. So you have some examples. All right, if you mix red and blue paint, you get purple. If we go to Italy next summer, we'll visit Rome. If I were a millionaire, I buy an island, for instance. So after you wrote them, you're going to give one piece of paper to one student, and this student is going to whisper, all right, to another classmate the sentence, and then it's going to move on and go on. So in the end, you're gonna ask your student to give you the sentence, and you're gonna check if they are actually getting the main idea. So through this warm up, you can practice vocabulary because they have to remember the structure. Also, you practice pronunciation because if the words are not being pronounced correctly, they are not going to be understood. So you can use a lot of skills through a simple but effective activity. So after you finish this as a teacher, now you're expected to write three sentences on the board, and you're gonna ask your students, so right, so you're gonna design like a chart, like a table, all right, and you're gonna write zero, first, and second, as you know that that's the topic. So you might be wondering why you have to also include the zero and the first conditional. You have to take into account that this is, I mean, this class is meant to be for B1 level of students, so they are going to have some previous knowledge, so it is not something that is going to be new for them. So we have to also recall what they already know. So as you write the chart, you're going to ask your students now, is this sentence a fact or an opinion or an unreal situation? Is it something true? And then through that kind of questions, your students are going to have the whole explanation. They're going to remember what they already know, and they're also going to get to discover the structures that are being used, especially on the second conditional. So this is an inductive approach when you teach grammar, which is quite it's time consuming because you have to put a lot of attention and pay a lot of attention to your students' answers and questions. But it's effective because they are going to be questioning their own knowledge, and they have to be critical about what they are answering. So it's actually nice to give it a shot. It's quite effective. Sure, it might be complicated, but again, this is not for beginners. This is for like a B1 level class. My suggestion for you will be to write the tenses that are being used below the table, so they get to see what structure it's being employed. So after this explanation, now we can actually use the deductive approach. So instead of explaining the whole grammar at the beginning, Like we're going to see the second conditional today. You start with the Chinese whispers, then you start like questioning what they know, and now you can move on and use a video. So my suggestion for this would be to actually present the following video. It's actually a great page for you to check as well for other topics, not just for this one. And you're going to pause the video to make any comments because they will be necessary, especially regarding the use, the intention of the second conditional structure, and also to highlight the grammar rules that are being employed. As you can see, you spent like 10 minutes on the previous activity, another 10 minutes here, so you can actually like emphasize the importance of this structure. So here it's interesting because you can combine different approaches at once, right? It's not necessary to just go with one. So after they have some like knowledge about it, they wrote down some notes. They're going to have like information, right, for the next activity. So the second conditional is done. Now you're gonna use it, all right, without actually them make them realize that you're using it, and we're going to combine it with vocabulary. So the topic was also travel, right? Or you can talk about holidays if you want. So you're going to ask your students the following question: if you had an unlimited budget to travel, where would you go? And you can provide some examples. I wrote Tokyo, New York, Paris, Cancun, Barcelona. So your students will get interest in the topic. They will want to chat, and they're going to use once again the structure. So you're going to say, okay, if you're going to answer, I need you to give me a full sentence. If I had an unlimited budget to travel, I would go to Cancun. I would go even to Mexico City if they want to. So you don't have to think about like foreign countries, but you can also think about like what is being around Mexico or even around here, Jalapa, no? For instance, if that's the case. So you're gonna try to foster the use of the second conditional without like making them write really long sentences. So this is just an example. Remember that sometimes when we teach we also have like a text book, and so we have to use it. So here we don't have a textbook. We're just trying to use the language for a specific purpose. So after you finish this, we also get to know new vocabulary, and this is like things that you can use or necessary things to take with you when you travel. And you're gonna ask the following question: what will you need to take with you during a trip? And you can say, okay, my passport, cash, my credit card, sunscreen, camera, an ID card, maybe my luggage, all right, a suitcase. And through this explanation you're gonna brainstorm. I mean, you're going to give them some useful vocabulary that they have to employ in a further activity, but you have the pictures there. So this is something that we do when we teach, and is guessing words from context. So we have the picture, they have the image, and they have to think about the possible meaning that they are going to find. So why is this necessary? Especially during a beginner class, we often give the translation right away, which is effective because you don't waste time trying to mimic everything. But as this is a B1 level class, students already know something. So it's like you're going to try to reduce the time of scaffolding that you do in the class so you can actually give them an idea. So the best thing you can do is to give them a picture and the name. And well, if they translate it, it's okay. I mean, it was what we do when we use a second or foreign language. But I would really, okay, yes, suggest you to avoid like giving a really quick translation. So try to give them like maybe the context or maybe a picture so they can guess what's the meaning. And well, after this, they're gonna have all the necessary vocabulary, grammar, structure, and we're gonna move on with the activity. As you can see, we're not even having like an activity like a printed activity one. So the kind of approach that I'm using here is a CLT. which is the communicative language teaching. And instead of trying to follow like a really um, strict, right, like approach, or the grammar translation, or trying to make them also use the L1 in the class, we're going to try to make them use the language for something that might seem necessary. In this case, they're going to plan a trip, and we're going to use the second conditional and the previous vocabulary that they were given. So, look, we're going to start with this. If we had a chance to travel, imagine that you have, I don't know, an unlimited budget. Once again, you won $1 million, and now you have the chance to travel whatever you like. So now you're going to ask your students to plan their trip, and they have to answer the following questions: where would you like to go? Who would you like to go with? What would you pack? Where would you like to stay? What would you do there? What souvenirs would you buy? For instance, if they have access to internet, they can also do some research and try to look for really famous places around like that place. Okay. And here, you as a teacher are going to be just a monitor. So you're gonna provide instructions. You have given the information and the necessary tools for them to carry out the following activity. So I would suggest you to just give them 20 minutes. You put it on the board, maybe you count, you put an alarm, right, and alarm clock, so they would know how much time they have left for the activity. And my suggestion, once again, will be to ask them to do a presentation to actually include pictures. If they don't have, I don't know, tablets or computers, they can even, I don't know, draw. I mean, the whole presentation. They can bring pictures. So it's something that it might seem like they are actually using the language without noticing. Okay. And once again, through this structure, we're actually practicing the second conditional. And it's effective because then in the end, the language is going to have an actual use, which is going to be to present their work. And as a teacher now, you are in charge of providing feedback. So while they're carrying out activity, they are writing some sentences, they are doing their presentation, you're just going to be there monitoring the whole classroom. So you're gonna make sure that they are actually speaking in English. Probably that if they have any questions about, like, I don't know, a specific word, you could help them. But I would encourage you to let them try to finish the activity before you intervene. So, well, after the activity is done, then the students are ready to present their work, and pretty much you have a time for that. But after they finish their presentations, now you're going to provide feedback. If you have a large group, which is really common in public schools, I would suggest you to give one feedback and at the end of the class. So, I mean, the students would not feel like you're like trying to call them out, right, for specific reasons. Instead, you are just saying, okay, I noticed that everybody made some errors, or you make some mistakes throughout the activity, and I would like you to encourage you to think about it, acknowledge that those errors are really common while speaking, but you can improve. Or you can also say, okay, probably there was a misunderstanding with some tenses, and you can give a full explanation. So this is just an example of the lesson that I planned. To be honest, it looks, I mean, it's easier said than done, and it's pretty common when you plan. Sometimes while planning, you have I mean, really interesting ideas. When you get to the actual place, the classroom, and with your students, things might change, so you can have a backup sometimes, or like an extra activity. Also, you might run out of time, which is completely normal. Try to, I don't know, if you have another chance, maybe for the following lesson you can use it. And when we start teaching, especially grammar, we tend to use the deductive approach. So we provide the whole grammar explanation, which is really useful, especially when the topic is really complex in advance, or in the beginner's class. But as your students, I mean, for this class, they are like B1s. students, they have previous experience with the language, so you can try to make them aware of the use and in their own knowledge, because they know, but sometimes they don't know the names as we are teachers, right? So, well, this is just an example. I hope that you might find it useful.